Welcome to Bible Study Hub. I'm Noelle. This is my mother, Ann. We are in Daniel chapter 7 tonight. And boy, is this a fun chapter. We're excited to be with you and talk about it. When we were doing our little prep, I just said to you, Mom, I feel like we need to position this because what we're about to read, if you just jump into it without any, context on what this means, where this sits in the broader, biblical narrative, it's just it kind of throws you back in your seat. You're like, oh my goodness, I don't really know what to do with this. I don't know where this is coming from. So Daniel chapter 7 tonight, can we just talk for a minute about what this is, why any of this matters? Just give us something to anchor.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been doing historical narrative in chapters 1 through 6. So a lot of just the absolute best Bible stories ever are located in Daniel 1 through 6. I mean, it's been so fun, and it's just been an incredible experience. When we get to chapter 7 through the end of the book, really, it really shifts to prophetic literature. And by that, we just mean stuff that some of it was prophesied and it's already happened, but much of it prophesied, we are still waiting for it to happen. So I think the question that we have then, Noelle, before we even get going with this, because it's going to get a little hairy tonight, I'm just going to warn you, it's a little crazy. What is the point? I mean, why do we even bother to read this? Why did God bother to write it? What's the point of it?
Yeah, so prophetic literature is going to be what is going to happen in the future. And at least for myself, I'm always asked the question, well, if you're going to tell us what's going to happen in the future, just tell us what's going to happen in the future. As we get into this, you're going to hear us say, well, it could mean this, it could mean that, it could mean any number of things. And it's like, oh, why is that? Why is that so hard? Why do we not have just a really solid, good answer? And the reason being that the way this book is written is not necessarily to just lay out explicitly what's going to happen. I think if we knew that, we'd all be freaked out and wouldn't know what to do and be trying to stop it or whatever, but rather to give us in the interim, while we're waiting for these events to happen, this proof of God's faithfulness and of his consistency to get to watch the Lord fulfill prophecies. So most of the prophecies in the book of Daniel have already come to pass. They've already been fulfilled. That gives us hope for the future. But then also, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, but to walk us through sort of this thing has value right now in how I live my life, how I know God, but then also when these events do start to come to pass, that people who are here on earth during that time have a reference point, have a guidebook on how they can behave, how they can act, what they should expect, so that they're ready for it. And so while it doesn't make immediate sense right now, it will make sense. And there's a verse actually, Daniel 12:4, so a little bit ahead, but it says, you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So this is Daniel chapter 12, but we'll be talking about Daniel 7 today. But Mom, I've heard this verse many times, and it was always told to me as, in the end times, in the apocalypse, people will be running around the earth and knowledge will be increasing. So you think people on airplanes and, on boats and, moving around the earth faster than they ever have before. And, computers and Google and knowledge just increasing at this rate.
Right.
That's not really what this means in context, though. How in context can this verse help us understand what we're about to read?
If you read the verses around verse 4, what you're going to find out is that what this is really saying is that as things happen, as the world moves down the timeline and things begin to unfold, they will go to the book of Daniel and of course the book of Revelation and a few others. They will open it up and they will be back and forth in that book looking and going, oh, this is it. What just happened, what I just saw on the news, this is it. It's in the book of Daniel. To and fro, knowledge increasing. Knowledge will increase. We talk about something called progressive revelation, and that is not that God gives you some kind of weird mystical download as you're brushing your teeth. That is not it. Progressive revelation simply means in the Bible itself, in that canon of scripture, which is closed, we're not adding to it, it's all complete. As we move on through time, things that are in that book become more and more clear to us because we start to see things be fulfilled that in the past, maybe we only knew as a prophecy, but now we are watching happening in real time. Noelle, you actually tonight, while we are prepping, just a brilliant example of this that I had never thought of, having to do with the crucifixion of Jesus. Tell us what that one is.
Yeah, when Jesus was on the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And you may have read that verse and been like, why did he say that? He's actually on the cross in that moment referencing Psalm 22. I believe it's Psalm 22. Somebody fact check me. Psalm 22, where David, the poet, is writing the psalm, and it starts with, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And what's incredible is go read this incredible psalm, because it is prophetic. It explicitly and carefully lays out the biological impacts of crucifixion 1,000 years before crucifixion was invented. It's talking about the behaviors of the people as they are casting lots for Jesus' clothing. I mean, it is precise to incredible details of what the crucifixion of Jesus will look like many years before. But what's incredible about it is that at the time that David was writing that, from everything I can tell, David did not realize that he was writing prophecy. And people who had read that psalm, they would have been very familiar with it. It was an incredibly valuable psalm. It is heartbreaking, but encouraging in this statement of God's mercy and his grace and how he fulfills what he says he's going to fulfill. So in and of itself, before Jesus, before the crucifixion, that psalm was valuable. That psalm had intrinsic, inherent value in telling us how to live our lives. And then when Jesus comes to the cross, all of a sudden there's this new light shed on it, where all of a sudden people realize, oh my goodness, that's prophetic. That was speaking about what Jesus was going to do on this cross. It didn't mean that previously it had been misunderstood necessarily, or that it wasn't valuable until that revelation, but it shines this additional light on it. And that's very much what we see in the book of Daniel. As we go through this, we're going to talk about things where we go, we don't really understand what this means. We might give some options of what it means. We might just sort of go, keep this in the back of your head in case you're unfortunate enough to be on the earth when this happens. But it doesn't mean that anything is not valuable right now for us. It's all valuable at all times. But when we get into the end days, when these things start fulfilling themselves, there will be new light shed on it just by virtue of, we'll have more information. We'll be seeing it from this different lens. Doesn't change the value, doesn't change what we get out of it today, but it will be this sort of special value, this extra importance at the end.
Right. And so it's important that we know what the Bible says at every possible juncture, so that when things like this start to happen, we go, wait a minute, I know I read that, and then we can go back and find it. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview as to where we're going tonight and then in future weeks. So chapter 7 of Daniel is like this big break in what we've been doing. Like I said, so we've gone from historical narrative to prophetic literature here. But Daniel 7:1 is going to tell us that it was written during the reign of King Belshazzar. It was a couple chapters ago. So last week, we talked about just the rule of the Medes and the Persians. So already we were past that. So it's a little bit of a backflash. Is that what that's called? Backflash? Flashback.
I think that's flashback. Yeah.
It's a flashback. I had the right words. This is what studying prophecy all week will do to your mind. It's like mush. And then so that's vision number 1. Vision number 2 comes in Daniel chapter 8. That's also back before where we just ended up last week. And then we move on to the 3rd and 4th vision. Those are going to take us into the years of the Babylonian downfall, and then the Medes and the Persians. So it's not so linear, although it kind of picks up and becomes linear, but we're backtracking just a little bit about that. I just want to say just a couple more things. I promise we'll get rolling here really, really fast.
We are rolling. This is important. What is Bible prophecy, I think, is the question we have to
ask. There you go.
We need some context.
You're right. Okay. So I'll stop apologizing. We'll just talk about it. One thing that Noelle and I are really, really going to make a concerted effort to do is to be really strong on the things that are already interpreted. A lot of the Bible actually interprets itself, and a lot of prophecy interprets itself. Some angel will show up, or God will interpret it for us. This is going to happen, by the way, next week, when we get to the end of chapter 7, an angel is going to help Daniel interpret what we're going to read tonight. So we're not going to really get into the nitty-gritty interpretation. We're just going to do a little overview tonight, but the angel will interpret it later. There are other times when the Bible does not interpret it for us. And so we make educated guesses. We try to put some puzzle pieces together. We will tell you when we're not sure. And then there are other times where we're like, I just don't know. I mean, I can't even make an educated guess. I just don't know. We will tell you when we don't know. We want to stay away from being in camps where we would say, oh, we're with this camp or we're with that camp with this label or that label. I don't want labels. I want to be biblical. I just want to say what the Bible says. I want the Bible to dictate what I think, not whatever camp I'm in or whatever pastor I happen to listen to the most or follow. We also want to remain really, really humble. So you may disagree with some of what we think. That's totally fine. And you might be right and we might be wrong. What we want to do is approach this with a true humility. We are not going to sit here and say, we know special stuff that nobody else knows. We don't. We know what the Bible tells us, and that's all we know. And if we think that there's more than one good guess as to an interpretation, we will give you the options. Because at the end of the day, Noelle, what we don't want is for our listeners and our viewers to be blindsided. What do we mean by that?
Yeah. Well, it's why talking about the prophecy even matters to begin with, because when we get to a point where these things start taking place and these things begin to happen, we want you to be knowledgeable and know what maybe the options are and know where to go and even know how to read these texts and how to interpret this information and how to think really critically about it. So for the most part, I'm not super strong, like I know this 100%. More so, my hope in sharing this with you is just when you're reading prophetic literature, when you're looking at events that are happening around you in the world, whether that's today or in 50 years, that you know how to encounter this book and think through these things in a really systematic, logical, and spirit-filled way so that you can make good decisions about it. Ultimately, God gave us this literature, and so it's like, okay, it's really hard. There's some just wacky imagery, there's some weird stuff in here, but because God gave it to us, we know that this is important and he wants us and expects us to know it. So our goal is to just know it and let the Spirit reveal to us what he wants us to do with it. But for myself, and I'll keep driving this home tonight, as we get into the text itself, we're going to just get into some details that you're going to be like, that's insane. No novelist or Hollywood director is going to come up with this level of amazing. As we do this, I want to keep this positioned as this is part of God's just like arching narrative, overall plan for humanity. And so he's sharing this information with us so that we can look forward to the second coming of Jesus. Jesus came
Amen.
first to save us from our sins, died on the cross, rose 3 days later, completely cleansed us of our sins, and then he'll come back again at the very, very end. And so all of this, what might be called apocalyptic literature, apocalyptic prophecy, is talking about that very end of days, what happens at the very end. And that's where we're getting to with all of this. And I don't know about you, but I'm really excited for Jesus to come rule and reign on earth. I'd love to know more about it. I'd love to understand it so that when that day comes, I'm not like, whoa, this is crazy. I don't know what to do. It's like, no. Maybe I didn't understand that when I first read it, but now I have that additional lens to look at it. I know what to do.
Yeah.
Is that sort of,
and it's all,
does that explain it? I know this is hard. I feel like I'm not doing a great job articulating why this matters so much.
Well, it's all about Jesus. And so the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation, it's not, we think it's about us, don't we? We just kind of come out of the womb all self-centered and we just stay that way unless we work really hard at it. It's not actually about us. It's about him. And we fit into that plan in God's gracious kindness somehow, some way. And he didn't have to tell us anything about what's going to happen, but he's too kind to do that to us. So he gives us some things to look for. This is all going to wrap up with, and I say this for anyone who's just never ever studied this before, just really general here, 7 years of Yeah, 7 years of what we call the tribulation. This is going to be 7 years of really, really bad times where God is pouring out his wrath on the earth. This comes from the book of Daniel and also the book of Revelation and a lot of other prophecies like throughout the Old and New Testament. Then after the tribulation, Jesus does return to earth. He sets up his kingdom on earth for 1,000 years. He will rule and reign with a rod of iron. So that means everybody toes the line. You don't get the opportunity to blaspheme him anymore. He will rule and reign, and everyone will serve under him. At the end of that 1,000 years, so we have the 7 year tribulation, 1,000 year reign of Christ. At the end of the 1,000 years, Satan, who has been locked up for 1,000 years, neglected to mention that, but Satan goes to the pit, the bottomless pit, for 1,000 years. That's why things, in part, are so good for 1,000 years. He and his demons are out of here. God lets him out. He gets the nations riled up really, really fast. They decide to go after Jesus, and Jesus takes them out. I like it's fast. And then that's it. No more sin, no more fighting, no more wars, no more Satan. It's all done. And eternity is eternity. And so then we who know Jesus Christ, we live with him forever and worship him and live with unmitigated joy and blessings forever and ever because of what Jesus did on the cross for us. That's the overview. Okay. So let's actually now get into now that we're 15 minutes in, let's get into the text of Daniel. Hopefully that will keep anybody from being just like, I can't hang. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I don't understand anything. That's your intro to this. So Noelle, why don't we just start with verse 1? Just read verse 1 and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so on the screen, verse 1, Daniel's writing about himself in the third person here, and Moses did this a lot in the Pentateuch. You hear Paul do this in 2 Corinthians. The Apostle John does this a lot. And so the Bible writers actually just talk about self-centeredness. They never make it about themselves. And so they're trying to put the focus on Jesus always. And interestingly, so if you go to Matthew 24:15, Jesus himself attributes the book of Daniel to the writer Daniel. So Daniel claims he wrote it. Daniel did write it. So that's what's going on here. And Daniel's lying in his bed here. He's having a dream vision. And so he's going to write it down for us in the coming verses. It says, first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And then he wrote down the dream and told them the sum of the matter. And let's just do verses 2-7, like big chunk, and then break it down because good heavens, verses 2-7 are insane. Here's a picture, an artist's rendering of what we're about to read. Get ready, folks. This is just blowing my mind. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then, as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And as you can see in that glorious picture, what we just read, which is okay. So start with verse 2. 4 winds of heaven are stirring up the great sea. This is just a metaphor, basically means like sweeping across the globe, what we might say like across the globe or around the world. It just means encompassing the whole world. It's just a metaphor. So north, south, east, west, everything's encompassed here. Interestingly, this often has to do with judgment. And we see this mentioned a bunch of other times in the Bible. There you go. These are all the other times it's mentioned in the Bible. So you can go and cross-reference it. These are all judgment verses. And it seems to mean that God almost blows wind that sort of stirs up the sea. So if God blows and stirs up a great sea, what's the great sea? And in context, Mom, you believe that this represents Gentile nations. Can you walk us through why and how?
Yeah, well, it's just real easy. When the Bible refers to the Great Sea, most of the time it's referring to Gentile nations.
Yep.
And from what else we know in other parts of prophetic literature, we know that in the end times it will be Gentile nations that get all riled up and
Right.
especially come up against Israel. So between past metaphors and just other scriptures,
Easy.
it's pretty clear. Yeah.
That's the last time we'll have clarity. All right. Verse 3. Enjoy that moment. Just sit there for a second. That's pretty clear.
Okay.
Verse 3. 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. And you're like, okay, so there's that picture that was just, wild science fiction. This is going to sort of parallel the statue that we studied in Daniel chapter 2. Go back and listen to that if you're interested. And these are the Gentile nations that will arrive. So, statue recap. Do we have that cool little spinning statue still? I really liked that graphic
Oh,
that I
yeah.
had.
Yeah.
The head of gold is the Babylonian Empire. That's where Daniel is right now. Arms and chest of silver, Medo-Persian Empire, they take it over. Belly and thighs of bronze, that's the Greek Empire. And then we said legs of iron. Some people believe that that's the Roman Empire, if you're going with sort of this linear progression of just, where this is going. We said, and we believe that this is an Islamic caliphate, the legs of iron, and then feet of iron mixed with clay. So this is the mix of that fourth empire, Roman or Islamic, revived plus something else. And this is talking about, right, the end of the world again. So this statue represents the succession of nations and of empires, and that last one being the one from which the Antichrist is going to arise from. So that's why it's important. You look at verse 4, it says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground, made to stand on 2 feet like a man. The mind of a man was given to it. Again, if you go back to our earlier lessons on this, King Nebuchadnezzar, pre-bovine, like this book is wild. King Nebuchadnezzar, not bovine, lion, strength, power, eagles, wings, power, greatness. Then God turns him into a cow, and he is not great anymore, and he acts like a cow for a while. And
Pluck the wings off.
Yeah,
Yep.
wings plucked off, greatness removed. And then
Yep.
post-bovine, when God restores his brain to him, he comes back up on 2 feet, mind of a man, sanity restored. So that's sort of that parallel with that statue. Verse 5, behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. So we got the bear analogy. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh, which is just an incredible thing to tell a bear. Again, most likely represents Medo-Persian Empire. Now we get into sort of this this is a little unclear. Perhaps raising up one side of the creature indicates one of the kingdom's parts is more dominant. That'd be Persia, right? 3 ribs in its mouth, Mom?
Yeah. Again, if commentators try to sometimes kind of shoehorn things in, and we don't really want to do that, but there's a couple possibilities for this. One is that they conquered basically 3 regions, nations, Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. So maybe that's what those 3 ribs in the mouth. To me, that kind of makes sense. Other people say no, it's the 3 provinces of the Medo-Persian Empire. Media, Persia, and Babylon. Okay, so we don't know, but I think we can say that a bear would be considered a big, almost clumsy, lumbering sort of animal, and that was what the Medo-Persian Empire
kind of just sort of bowled through, just devouring flesh, and it was not a good time.
Lumbered their way along, right?
Yeah, not real stealthy. So now we go to the leopard. So
this is where it gets harder. It gets harder. So after this, I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. So we've got the number 4. The beast had 4 heads. Again, 4. And dominion was given to it. So if this corresponds with the statue, then this would have to be the Greek Empire. And because the others seem more clearly to correspond with the statue, even the next one, we go, okay, it probably is. Here's the problem. That number 4 seems really significant, and I cannot get comfortable with what that means. If go ahead and study it, you will come up with a multitude of people going, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. No, it's really not clear.
Put in the comments what you think it is. If you have an opinion, by all means, go for it. It does. the fact that it's repeated and so clearly specified seems to indicate it's important, but particularly in the context of the Greek Empire, which is where this would logically follow, it's like, I don't quite know what that would be in the Greek Empire. And to be clear, so it does sort of make sense. This is the leopard, fast, nimble, quick.
Add
brutal.
wings to it really fast.
Oh my goodness. And so the Greek Empire was fast in conquering. It was nimble. But it's hard to come up with where that number 4 is, what the significance of it is. Some people say that when Alexander the Great died at 33, his kingdom was divided into 4 dynasties, like possibly, like that could be it. But
it's kind of more like
again,
5.
it feels, yeah, I mean,
it's kind of a stretch to make it 4.
It's really a stretch. You can look at this. I mean, you can divide up a kingdom any number of ways. It feels kind of shoehorned. So we're going to say it's the Greek Empire. We'll have at that. It could be the 4 pieces among 4 generals.
That's what most commentators will say, by the way. So that's probably right. It's probably right. It just depends on how you split it.
Yeah. But let's keep going until you thought that was weird. You thought we didn't understand what that means. Let's just move on. Verse 7.
Okay, here we go.
After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong, as if the others weren't. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, remember in Daniel chapter 2, the legs of iron. This is what I said at that time. Traditionally sort of thinking Roman Empire is the legs of iron. We sort of said we think it's the Islamic Caliphate that's the legs of iron. And so when Daniel 7 here reiterates, these teeth of iron and pulling that iron back, it's like, we'll just bring this thread through. That seems like we're talking about whoever the legs of iron are is this beast too. And now we've got these 10 horns going on and all sorts of crazy stuff. There's more that comes later in this, right, Mom, that sort of helps us interpret this a little bit?
Actually in Daniel 7:7, let's see if I can pull that up here.
I'm thinking it's 7:23.
I said 7. That's what I meant to say. In my brain, it said 23, but my mouth said 7, just like the number 7. I don't know. It says, thus he said, as for the 4th beast, so this is the angel interpreting it at the end of the chapter, but it's a lot. So we're just going to jump over there for a quick second. We'll do this more next week. There shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which will be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. This sounds like the iron legs. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom, 10 kings shall arise. Okay, so the statue had 10 toes. Now we've got 10 horns coming up. So I just want to go back. Really quickly. I hope that this is okay to do. We're going to do it fast and just show you maps that kind of, because here's the thing. And you need to know this because the Antichrist is going to come out of one of 2 regions that we can figure out here. Either the Roman Empire.
Let me stop for a moment. The Antichrist comes out of the legs of iron. So
yes,
that is Antichrist is legs of iron. So whoever the leg of iron is, we should be like paying attention.
And this 4th beast, which seems to correspond with the legs of iron.
Yeah. So we've got to know who that 4th beast is, who the legs of iron are. That'll tell us where to be looking for the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the one who kicks off all of these events in the end and just wreaks havoc before Jesus comes back.
You want to know who it is
if he shows up. So we've got 2 major options.
All right.
So Babylonian, walk us through it.
So here's a map of the Babylonian Empire. You can see this is in the Middle East. You've got the Mediterranean Sea to the left there. You can see Egypt and so forth. Then they're conquered by the Persian Empire. There's the Persian Empire. You can see it's the same general vicinity, just a little expanded. Then we have the Greek Empire, same general vicinity, just a little expanded. Here comes the Roman Empire, completely different. It does have a little crossover, but not a lot.
It's tiny.
Yes. And then we have the Islamic Empire, which, as you can see, expanded again, but still the same basic
Yeah.
region. So here's the thing. If you believe that this is the Roman Empire that is the legs of iron or this fourth beast, that's absolutely, that is valid. I'm not for a moment going to say no, you're wrong. That would be if you think that the statue goes and the timeline associated is a very linear, successive thing. So one after the other, after the other, after the other. If that's the case, and you're right, it is the Roman Empire because they were the ones that really conquered Greece. That makes sense in our minds.
So let me stop you for a moment. If it is the Roman Empire, where in the world should I be looking today for the Antichrist to come out of?
You're going to be looking at Europe.
A Roman. Okay. There's
you got to look at Europe
per se, but yeah, this is going to be Europe, maybe Northern Africa to like some small extent. There it is.
There
so
you go.
Can see it.
He's got to come somewhere from this area, right? It could happen. This could happen.
Absolutely.
So again, we're not putting it down at all. If it's regional more than it is linear timeline, then it's going to be the Islamic Caliphate. And also I have to think that in Daniel 2, that stone that represents Jesus, not cut from human hands, strikes the feet of iron and clay, and the whole statue comes down. So when Jesus strikes this final kingdom, all the kingdoms that preceded it, which we know are on that map, the maps of the Middle East, all of those crumble. So if it's the Roman Empire, then he strikes Europe and all the Middle East crumbles. Is that possible? Yes, sure. It is possible. But it makes more sense to me that it would already be over there. And there's just some other things too. But anyway, whether you go regional and it's Islamic Empire, or you go, no, it's linear timeline, it's the Roman Empire, we just don't want you to be blindsided by anything. So at least you know those are the two regions. One of them is going to be right, and we'll be looking to and fro in the book of Daniel, and knowledge will increase as things happen, right?
We'll be like, there it is. Now we know the answer. And by that point, we're not going to be feeling happy if we were right.
We won't.
Like,
oh no.
Oh, I can't believe this is happening in my lifetime.
I did not want to see this.
It's a bad day. But that fourth beast then is whatever those legs of iron is. That's also, if we assume this is, sort of parallel with that statue, that fourth beast is as well. If we go to sort of second half of verse 7, I read the first half. This is just so interesting because this is new information. This was not disclosed in Daniel chapter 2 in King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. We get some new information. It says, this is talking about the fourth beast. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Which is just like, I don't even know how to like visualize that at this point. Like, this reminds me of math classes where we got to like levels of dimensions where I was like, I don't know, I can't even visualize what we're doing anymore. That's how I feel here. Like, we've gone from the horns, we had 10 horns, we got little horn rise up, 3 horns get plucked out, this horn gets big, it has eyes, now it has a mouth, and the mouth is speaking great things, and you're like, wait, but now we're a horn on this great beast that is different from the other beasts. It's just like, oh, it's a lot. This is stuff that has not yet happened, but it will. This is where we get into that really just like depth of prophecy. This has not come to pass yet, but it will. And end of chapter, we sort of read this a little bit in verse 23. The angel will go into a lot of detail about this. I love that the Bible interprets itself, so we can spend a lot of time just like all over the place, but the Bible does a really nice job of interpreting itself. Let's talk about the 10 horns though. 10 horns?
Okay, these in some way, shape, or form, these are 10 nations or 10 empires of some sort. They are not just a random assortment from around the globe. This is a coalition of 10 nations. So again, if you're looking Roman Empire, you're looking to Europe for this 10 nation coalition. If you're thinking more Islamic Caliphate, you're looking to the Middle East for a 10 nation coalition. And so keep your eyes open for that. And then it talks about a little horn. The little horn is what we call the Antichrist. Probably, even if you haven't studied Bible prophecy, that's probably not a term that you're completely unfamiliar with. Antichrist. This is not just somebody who is opposed to God. This is a very specific man who will come on the scene, who will be, empowered by Satan himself And his goal will be, the Antichrist goal will be to utterly obliterate and destroy Israel and to wipe any believer in Jesus Christ off the planet.
Yep.
He will start out looking like a man of peace. We know this from the book of Revelation as well. And then as time goes on, he will kind of like kick off the 7-year tribulation. As time goes on, he will show his true colors, and we'll get into more of what happens with that a little bit later. But it says, before which of the first horns in verse 8 were plucked, three of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. So there's all these horns, and then this little horn grows up and like displaces 3 of the horns. Okay, Noelle, what's your best guess? That's just crazy. What is that?
I mean, and not to get all like difficult about semantics, but displace is even too light of a word. Plucked up by the roots is this violent action, especially when you consider this is on the head of this like beast. Yeah. I don't know. I picture that as being just this horrifying thing. I've got this really visceral response to this. It's like, so you've got this 10-nation empire coalition, and then the Antichrist seems to basically completely absorb, overtake, maybe annihilate 3 of those 10. I guess the question then, is this like a hostile takeover? Does he bring peace and meld 3 into 1? We just don't know. That whole plucking out by the root thing is just really interesting to me, though, because it almost indicates this complete removal and annihilation happening, where this hasn't happened yet. We'll wait and see. You know, hopefully don't be in one of those 3 nations that happens to. I mean, it strikes me as being this really, really violent act, almost as if they are just completely removed from the earth.
Right.
Hasn't happened yet. Not sure what exactly that will look like, but not.
And I think what we can really pull from this, since we don't know the details of it yet, is that this is a very, 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 very powerful man. This is not just a guy who is a great orator, although he is. It's not just a guy who is really evil, although he is. He is empowered by Satan to accomplish certain things. So what he will do in the world is really unprecedented on many levels. So as he sweeps through various regions and he takes over, I mean, there's a piece in the Bible where the people looking at him go, who can make war with the beast? They call him the beast. Who can make war with this guy? Like, nobody can fight him. He wins. He always wins. He's too strong. He can't be overtaken. And that's when Jesus says, watch me. But anyway, we'll get to that later. It says, Noelle, also in this chapter 7, verse 8, that he will speak great things. What does that mean?
Great things. Don't get too hung up by the word great. It doesn't mean like good or wonderful, obviously, in the context. I think you don't get that. Great in the sense of extremely pompous, powerful, crafty, compelling. I think that's the word that comes to my mind. It's just compelling things that he is speaking. When I picture this guy, I picture just crafty, insidious, strategic, foxy. His speech will be powerful. What comes out of his mouth, what's sort of interesting, we get more of this in the book of the Revelation, the very end of your Bible, if you want to flip there. This is just one characteristic of this guy, but it does appear that this will be sort of his primary tool for getting his foot in the door and beginning to take over in this extraordinary, extreme way, this powerful oration, this almost what I feel like is a polemic style. He's so effective in this way. And that's, I mean, we've seen powerful orators before. I think when this person comes on the scene, it will be that times 1,000, because it's literally, powered and fueled by Satan himself, even though this is a man. That's sort of a scary thought. Roberta shares that her version says great boasts. I like this because that also gets to sort of this arrogance and this pompousness. And when we say antichrist, you sort of got to this. It's not just against Christ, but it is everything that the Christ is. He is the inverse of it. He is the exact opposite of it. So in every way that Christ was humble and merciful and gracious and kind. This man is arrogant and pompous and destructive and deceitful in his speech. And I do like Roberta's version, great boasts, almost
I
gets
like
to that
that.
more. Can
I
we,
like that.
okay, we got to bring it down for a second. What was that?
Is anybody just feeling like, whoa?
Why did we do this? It's Labor Day. Like, it is labor. Beasts are terrifying. We've got 4 of them. They're horrifying. This is a lot to swallow. And I think at this point, God in his graciousness writing this knows that we need some hope. And again, just sort of anchor this again on, I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because I want you to be prepared and I want you to be excited about the coming of Jesus. And I think that's really like where God's coming from. And so at this point, God just does something incredible. And he gives us this little glimpse with Daniel into the throne room of heaven itself. And it's just this reprieve for a moment from everything that's happening on earth to sort of pull this back up and go, let me position this for you in the larger plan of things. It's like, this is insanity. This, I don't know about you, but this just feels so chaotic and destructive and hopeless when we talk about this beast and this Antichrist and what Antichrist means. It's just, you just kind of want to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not
It's
here
daunting.
for it. I so hope.
It's daunting.
He gives us this view in. Talk to us about this. This is 9 and 10 verses 9 and
Yeah.
10.
Let's just read it. It says, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. Can you picture this? The throne has wheels. And then verse 10, a stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him. By the way, these are just like numbers innumerable. This is their way of saying too many to count. And 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment and the books were opened. So who is this Ancient of Days, Noelle? Who is that?
I mean, it's very evident. This is God himself. This is our God. This is the God of the universe. This is our Father in heaven.
The one who's going to take
like,
out the Antichrist.
This is the interlude we needed to like that horrible like beast stuff.
Yeah.
Now we're in the throne room of heaven. And what I love about when we study the Bible, we study the Word of God, is this holistic, complete view that we get of God. So yes, God is love and he is mercy and he is grace. He is also just and he is righteous and he is holy. And these are things that for us, we cannot necessarily hold perfectly at all times together, and God does. And even just in the positioning of this and how you hear Daniel talk about this and try to describe what he's seeing, and clearly can't come up with words, and so he's trying the best he can. We get to see the power of God and the graciousness of God in this. And there's part of me that goes, this is so beautiful, and it's so beautiful juxtaposed against what we just got with that beast situation. And at the same time, it's frightening, almost more so than the previous, because we have this all-powerful, mighty, strong, holy, righteous, just God. And if I have any even minutia of a view of who I am relative to that, I know that I cannot stand before that. And so to even hear this description and to know what happens next is like, oh my goodness, this is weighty in a very different way than the beast was. I can almost be glib about that because it's so evil. And this just feels, this is holy. And the anthropomorphic descriptions.
Define that term, Noelle.
Yeah. So God is a spirit. God is not a human, but Daniel, being a human like us, is trying his best to describe what he's seeing in the only terms he has, which are these human terms. So he's talking about clothing, pure white, and hair, pure white. Mm-hmm. And then we've got this description of what's around him. You've got fire all around him, these innumerable beings that are serving him, that are worshiping him. This court that's sitting in judgment, he's the judge. The books are open. So we take this holy God, this incredible God, and Daniel's trying his best to give us some like semblance of a view of who he is in the terms that he had.
Mhm.
But it's a again, this is so classic God. You've got this tension of just the wonder and awe and beauty of it with the absolute terror of the
His
situation.
holiness
Yeah.
and who he is. And I think what, so what's the takeaway on this is probably the question. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we've just been through a lot of really scary beasts, and now we have this vision of God, which, even though comforting, is also a little bit terrifying. Not just a little bit, it's a lot terrifying. So
Yeah.
why is this on the
Yeah.
pages of scripture? What do we need to do with this? And I just want us to know that when we are living in a world, which we always are, that feels very out of control, it feels daily like it's more out of control sometimes than the day
I
before,
know.
and like there's nothing we can do to bring it back. I don't know if you ever feel like that, like I just want things to go back to the way
Oh,
they
I
used to be,
know.
and I can't make it happen. I can't do anything about it. It's just happening around me and to me, and I'm out of control. That at those moments we have a God who is on his throne, who is able to execute judgment at the proper time, who is holy, who is righteous. We talk about justice a lot in our world, and everybody wants justice, but they don't want the judge. You can't have the justice without the judge. So this is our glimpse into, yeah, things are going to be bad. Yeah, there's going to be this horrible, horrible Antichrist who's fueled by Satan himself, but not to fear, because the holy, righteous, powerful God of the universe is on his throne, 100% in control of all of it, of all of it. Every last moment that's going to go down, God is in control of. And for me, anyway, that gives me peace. So let's go
Yeah.
back to the text for a second. It talks about
Yep.
books being open. What books?
Yeah.
What are these?
Yeah. If you want to read more on this, Revelation chapter 20 really sort of expounds on what this is. These are books opened in judgment. And so he's, opening these judgment of the Antichrist. Is this the same judgment as in Revelation 20, which is going to be judgment on people who've rejected Christ? It's not entirely clear here, but what we do know is that there is judgment in this moment. And again, we sort of get back to this like tension of, on one hand, it's like, finally, like, let's do something. This place is a wreck. This is not going well. Like, let's judge it. And then on the flip side, it's like, okay, if I have any even semblance of understanding of who I am, then I know what my judgment should be, and that's frightening. So what we do know is that these are books of judgment, whether it's judgment on the Antichrist, judgment on people who've rejected Christ, as in Revelation 20, unclear, but it's judgment. Do you
Yeah.
want to try to get into finish up 11 to 12?
Yeah, I do.
You want to do it? Okay.
Let's do 11 and 12, and then we're gonna take it off.
We'll do our deep breathing after this.
Then go to
Okay.
bed and go to sleep. Okay.
have sweet dreams, don't I? This is still Daniel chapter 7, verse 11. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. So we're back to this, this beast. And as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time.
Okay.
This is like
All
so
right.
weird. This is so weird. Okay.
Okay. So
break it down.
here's the thing. Sometimes in the Bible, the beast refers to the Antichrist, and sometimes the beast refers to like the kingdom, plural, like nations, but his domain. So it's kind of, so you have to pick up from context exactly what's going on here. At this point, I personally believe that this beast is speaking of the kingdom, because a couple things. First of all, it's contrasted with the other kingdoms, right? So we've got a lot of kingdoms in play. Also, in the book of Revelation, it says specifically that the Antichrist is thrown alive into the lake of fire. And here it's saying that the beast is killed and body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. So that makes me think that this beast, particularly because it's a little bit of a different description, probably has to do with the kingdoms. Now, we have the rest of these beasts, these other kingdoms that are not completely destroyed, but their dominion is taken away, which means their sovereignty is taken away. What this appears to be, and again, I'm not going to be super, super dogmatic here, but to the best of my ability to understand, I believe this is talking about when we go into the millennial kingdom and Jesus Christ rules and reigns, that these kingdoms are not completely blown off the map and gone, but their sovereignty is taken away and given to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords when Jesus is ruling and reigning over the entire earth. So they will still exist, but they exist under his domain, under his rule, and they are allowed to last for a time.
Okay, can I stop you for
You
a
want to add
moment?
anything?
Because,
Add
well,
stuff.
no, I just want to ask a question to just, really throw a wrench in everything. What I don't understand about this is that we've said the other beasts are these kingdoms, so Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek. I mean, we all know that those kingdoms have long since dissolved. Like, there is no Babylonian Empire today. The
Right.
Greek Empire, like, that doesn't exist today. So how is it then that these beasts at the end, when this happens, are, their dominion is taken away, but their lives are prolonged for a season and a time? It's like, how is that possible when by the time this happens, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece are long, 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 long gone?
Yeah, I'm tempted to ask our viewers, but I guess it's getting late. If you want to comment, go ahead,
Well,
and should we just
if
ask
you
him?
want to, yeah.
Okay, start answering. What do you think? How does that happen? How does that work out? And I'm sorry we haven't asked very many questions tonight. Some studies, like last week, just lent itself to like loads of interaction between the audience, and other weeks we just don't want to do that to you because this has been kind of a tough one.
This is a hard question. I'm curious what you have to say. How is it that their dominion can be taken away, but their lives are prolonged for a season at a time, when Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persian Empire have been today long since demolished?
Yeah, we're
In
talking a
some
couple
ways,
thousand years.
yeah, we're way out from that. We all know that. In some ways, it makes me question, should we go back and reconsider the axioms? Like, maybe these aren't perfectly aligned with that statue. Maybe that's not who this is. But that's just me trying to, really throw a wrench in at the 11th hour of this particular episode.
I'm noticing it's very quiet on the home
Radio
front
silence.
here.
They're like, we think your axioms are wrong.
They're probably like, just end this thing.
What do you think?
No, well, I mean, I'm looking at regions more than I'm looking at specific countries. So,
Yeah.
this is great. Hang on. So maybe the Antichrist reestablish them. Okay. I think
Good
that's
statement.
that's a great statement, Roberta. I love Susie. She has no
Susie's
clue.
with us.
Susie, I think I'm just really kind of there with you, honestly.
She didn't know I was gonna ask that. That's unfair of me. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry. I didn't mean
no,
to
I
step
mean,
up on it like
like I
that.
said, I think it's more regions. You know, when they are taken out by Jesus, we're looking at the leadership going, the sovereignty being taken from them, but it's not like a nuclear bomb hits it and it blows it off the map. It's still there, but now it's being ruled by Jesus. Noelle, you just look like no.
No,
You tell me what you think.
I don't know. I
Now
don't know.
you have to say.
No, I do like that this is speaking not of actual empires, but rather of geography and actual locations on a map, that it's not being blown away. But the problem is that if we then go with that, when that fourth beast is burned and destroyed, that fourth beast regionally encompassed the entire thing. It's like, how do they do that? That's really strange. It's also curious, like, is it possible that this is some statement purely of like those 10 horns being representative of these other kingdoms in some ways? And so those nations, those kingdoms get to kind of continue. I don't know. But
Mm.
I like what Lori says. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I want to read this one. Somebody says,
Yes.
I would suggest the fourth kingdom is quote unquote finished with the reign of Christ, but the other three beasts were not completely destroyed, but absorbed by the succeeding kingdoms, which is the beast. So I think that's really a great one. And then Lori says they lost their usefulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are
Succinct.
all good. It's sort of an unfair question on my part to throw in at the last absolute second. But in some ways, that's what I appreciate about this, because what we want to do is be just intellectually honest and intellectually rigorous and say, hey, we can walk through these things, and I think we have really good bases for why we say this and why we think this is true, and the axioms tend to hold up. And then we get to something like that, and I go, oh, well, wait a second, this doesn't totally make sense. And this is where I really wanted to position this in light of that verse in Daniel chapter 12, where it talks about they'll go to and fro and knowledge will be increasing. Because I'm going to just bet, and I would put money on this, but by the time this happens, money won't matter. I would put money on when the end comes and when this is all happening, there are going to be people who are reading this who go, oh, yeah, obviously, that's exactly how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
That's what that means. That's
without
how that
a doubt.
happens. And it'll be so obvious, but there would have been no way for us to know it right now. And the fact that it doesn't totally make sense indicates to me I don't need to know right now. God will give me everything I need to know.
That's
so
right.
What is it that I'm taking from this text? Because it is valuable right now. What is it that I'm taking from it that's valuable? And at least for myself, and I'm going to ask you the question, Mom, what's valuable for you in a moment. But for myself, what's valuable about this text is actually to observe the grand narrative that God has so perfectly and beautifully and carefully orchestrated over the entire course of history and humanity for his purposes, with a whole bunch of actors who are diametrically opposed to him and hate him and thinking they're doing their own thing. And it's like, no. You've got this thread that runs through history. And in the end, God still rules and reigns. He's still in charge. He still works. And that means that in my little tiny life, it's going to last 80 years on this planet, God's narrative arc is going to run through this as well. And so when this feels out of control, well, how much more in control is God of my little 80 years versus the entire span of eternity? And that's what that's what gets me so excited. That's what I get out of this.
I love it.
I don't totally understand what this means prophetically, but I do know what this means about the character of God and how he interacts with me. Okay, so same question to you, Mom. What do you get?
Well,
why is this meaningful to you?
I was thinking of the analogy, like if you've ever watched a movie that just is really, really suspenseful and it stresses you out as you watch it, and you watch it all the way and then it resolves at the end or whatever. If you were to go back and watch that same movie again, you wouldn't be at all stressed out. There would be no angst because
that's why I always read the Wikipedia first. Yeah.
There you go. Because you know how it ends. And as I interact with friends and neighbors and people that I know who do not know Jesus and do not have the Word of God as part of their reading, as part of their life, they don't have any understanding of it. There is so much angst in their lives as they look at what's going on, and they truly have no idea how this movie ends. They don't know how it ends. And wow, when you're really living it, that is super scary. And so for me, it's just that piece of, even though I know things are going to get really, really bad during the tribulation, there are times when I literally, probably just with the help of the Holy Spirit, I can put all of that behind me and go, but Jesus, I can't wait for you to rule and reign. Like, that is the icing on the cake. I mean, it's going to be like, finally, Lord, finally, no more fighting against you, no more blaspheming you, no more mocking you. I'm so tired of that. And I look forward to those things. And I'm so grateful that God gave us this information, even though we don't understand quite a bit of it. He's given us enough that he has interpreted for us that is very clear, that we can sit back and go, I know how the movie ends, so it's okay. I don't have to worry. I don't have to be stressed out. I can have peace. I can actually sleep tonight because I'm not worried about it. So we want that for each one of you.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Noelle and I we're always in prayer that anybody who happens to be watching this, that the Spirit of God would truly move in your heart, that if you have never come to that place where you have said, I know I'm a sinner, like bad, big time sinner, and I am so, so sorry for the affront that my sin is to God, and you have not cried out to him to save you. He died on the cross to take the wrath of God. That God that we read about here, that is just utterly terrifying because he's so righteous and so holy. That God paid the penalty for your sin so you wouldn't have to, but you have to reach out in faith and ask Jesus to save you. So we hope that you will do that if that's not something that you have already done. And we pray that you will.
There goes
Anything else
that
you want to say?
narrative arc again. It goes all the way. Our own little lives and the whole course of human
That's right.
history starts with God, ends with God. He's got
That's
this.
right.
I love it. Quick
That's right.
announcement for those of you who want like the doctrine side of this. What do we do on Thursday nights?
Yeah, Thursday nights, it's probably a 12-week or so series. My husband, Noelle's father, will be doing a doctrine or theology series here on Bible Study Hub. So if you're watching right now, either on Facebook or on YouTube, Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time. If you want to, log back in and we'll do an hour. I think he and I, Noelle, you and your dad did it last week. It'll be Lee and me this week coming up, doing the Trinity. Woo! I've already been watching some videos and stuff, just trying to wrap my head around that a little bit so we can talk about it. It's blowing my mind in such a great way. So
right?
If you've ever been like, wait, what is the Trinity? Why is that word not found in the Bible? And yet we throw it around. How is that? And how can God be one God, but he's also three? How does that work?
Polytheists. Are we polytheists?
There you go.
Good
Okay,
question.
so we're going to talk about all that stuff. We're going to answer those things. Comment on Facebook anytime during the week if you want to ask a question that you want us to answer. That would be great.
This is the thing is so he's doing this series on these core tenets of what we believe on Sundays at church and then taking questions. And so Thursday night we're going to just like take those questions. So ask, like, if you've had those things where you're just like, this has bugged me and is like gnawing at my brain. I've got those. I've got a good one on modalism that I'm going to throw in there. Like, you guys won't know what's going to hit you. If you don't know what that word means by the end of next Thursday, you will. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. Send your questions. You can comment it on Facebook. It's going to be a blast. We'll see you at Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And then also Monday nights here, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Find us on Facebook. Find us on YouTube. We love you, fam. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Bye-bye.